Hey, welcome back, friends, to the Autry Benton Show. If you didn't catch our first part of the interview with Senator Dick Harpootlian, I encourage you to go back and watch. Fascinating story as we learned about his early life and what's got him started into the law in the early part of his career. Senator, welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me back.
Yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot already. In this episode, I want to dig into your book, Dig Me a Grave. You're a prosecutor now working in the office. And before we dig into the book, this is just a broad question I got about people. You know, reading the book, I just find that my mind was wrapped up in dark things of life, a killer and what was going on. I can't imagine what it's like for you day in into the deep, you know, all the parts of it. What's it like to be in that all day long and then go home and have dinner with your wife or your family? How do you shift that?
Well, there's a couple ways to deal with it. One way I think happens with most folks that deal with death, violent death, day in and day out, is your ability to be empathetic shrinks. Your ability to empathize with people has to shrink, because if you're empathetic with them, you can't do your job.
Right.
And so that, I think, your sense of sympathy and empathy atrophies, and that's not a good thing. Now, you can accommodate that in a number of different ways. Not a lot, but some people react to that by wanting to dull that feeling. They drink, they use drugs, whatever. Others may undertake other risky kinds of behaviors. Or you just, deal with it, maintain good social relationships, maintain a good relationship with your spouse. The solicitor's office was more than just people I worked with. They were my friends. We socialized together. We shared experiences together. And I think that happens whether you're in the Army or whether you're in a prosecutor's office or a public defender's office or whatever. You have common experiences that only you understand. Each of you have seen the horrible things or dealt with just unfathomable pain and suffering. Doctors in the ER. I mean, they all share this experience. So it ain't easy, and it takes a toll, and ultimately will take a toll on you and your relationships.
Yeah. Wow. So you said it's not easy, but it's like you've done a good job. You've maintained a healthy family, and so.
Sort of.
That's great. Well, hey, let's get into the book. So tell our listeners who Pee Wee Gaskins is, if they don't know who he is, and tell us about the book, early on.
So Pee Wee Gaskins ultimately got to be known because he was the largest, in the mid-'70s, the largest serial killer in the history of the state. Pled guilty to killing 13 people, pregnant woman, baby, young girls, got hired to kill a guy by a woman who he had spurned. It's just he was a hitman. He did it all. And because of the breadth and length of those murders, he became a folk figure, not a hero, but everybody in the PD especially became aware of who he was. And he was known by everybody. But he was a roofer. He was a mechanic. So one of the things we found as we prepared the trial on the Tyner killing, and we'll talk about that in a minute, was that everybody in that area of the state knew him or knew somebody that knew him or had a personal experience with him. Hell, since the book has come out, I got a call from a guy who, as a young man's father, worked with Pee Wee as a roofer.
Wow. And
Pee Wee would come by and take all the kids to buy ice cream in his hearse. He drove a hearse, and he'd pile the kids in and go down and buy ice cream for them. So everybody's got stories about him. But he became infamous. And the book describes, how he grew up and the horrible abuse he went through and all the things that shaped him into what he ultimately became, a guy who liked to kill. There's no other way to describe him. And because of that, he was renowned, infamous. Everybody knew who he was. Parents would use stories about Pee Wee to tell their kids or scare their kids into coming home early for dates. You don't want to be out there, Gaskins will get you.
Yeah.
So, you know, when I met him in the fall of 1982 at a bond hearing, he's 5'2", 145 pounds. You look at him and say, this is this dangerous killer? Mm-hmm. And he was just an extraordinarily good con man. He met everybody with a smile and a handshake and a laugh. He walked in the courtroom shackled, looked at me and said, "Hey, Dick, how you doing?" I said, "Okay, Pee-wee, how about you?" So I'm immediately on a first name basis with this serial killer. And comfortable with it. I mean, it was just the biggest, con there is. And he conned me. And again, in the book, there's a point in the trial when we're at lunch. He convinced the guards to let him eat lunch in the courtroom. Never heard of such a thing. And I'm over at my table working, getting ready for the afternoon. And I hear that high-pitched voice, "Dick, Dick." So what do you want, Pee-wee? He said, "You know, you're a lot like me." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You like killing." I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Yeah, you like killing me. You're having fun doing this. You're out to kill me and you're enjoying it." I said, "No, we're different, da-da-da-da-da." And we went back and forth, and he finally said, just sort of sarcastically, "Yeah, you like killing me." So he knew or tried to get in my head. Did a little bit.
Yeah.
You start wondering, what am I? What am I doing here? But he was very talented, charismatic. He had a whole little cult around him. Mm-hmm. The misfits, the parolees, the young girls, the runaways. He killed a bunch of them, his so-called friends. But he was the master of the con.
Yeah. You know, Senator, as you talk about that, what you described as a kid growing up in the 80s, just what you described, Pee-wee Gaskins, I knew the name, didn't know the details, but knew he was a bad guy. My daughter read this book along with me, and this might be an unfair question, but she asked me early in his life, he had it very tough, and the law is the law. We serve our consequences if we do wrong. Do you think his upbringing, his bad circumstances helped shape him, or just I don't know if a man can answer that question. But
well, it's tough to. I will tell you this: there's no question he was sexually abused by some of his mother's boyfriends at a very young age, 3-4 years old. There's no question that when he ultimately went off to a juvenile facility to get back to the segregation, the Florence Industrial School for White Boys was the name of the institution in the 40s. That he was locked into a dormitory every night with 30 or 40 other boys. Tiny little guy, obviously sexually abused every night. He escaped 8 times to get out of there. But he was sent to the state hospital, mental hospital, by the superintendent, who wrote in a note he wrote to go with Gaskins to the hospital, indicated that young Mr. Gaskins is disturbed and certainly has homicidal tendencies and will kill one day. That's at age 14.
They had him pinned.
So yeah, was he shaped that way, or was he born? I don't know. It's hard for me to believe people are born evil.
Yeah.
But we don't know.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you answering that. The other thing with him is, you describe early on car thieves just in the mischief all the time, and that time I just trying to wrap my mind how he didn't get caught quicker, and then even to your point, his misfits around him, they kind of got missing before they caught up with him. It's just hard for me to, in our, I guess it's new age technology, how quickly we can catch up with crime. Am I missing it there, or did it?
Well, you can't use today's. There's no video cameras.
Right.
There's no DNA.
Okay.
There's no fingerprints. There's no electronics that would trace somebody. There's no cell phones.
Yeah.
There's no. So it's got to be somebody saw something or heard something, or somebody wrote something down, and so it took a long time to connect the dots back then. It'd be a lot quicker today because there's video cameras everywhere. There's, you drive by a ring cam, somebody's door ring cam, and it's captured. So I just think that, and he was very, very careful. He didn't leave bodies laying around, he buried them. There were no bodies found until he found them. Well, one of them was found in a ditch, but the rest of them, he had to take them to him because he buried them.
Yeah. Wow. Two things that stood out to me. Certainly, he was a racist.
Absolutely.
I mean, and that's what drove a lot of his evil.
Well, the Doreen and Robin, the pregnant woman he drowned, and the baby he beat to death with a hammer.
Can you say that again? That's how evil he was. Tell our audience what he did.
He had a girlfriend named Doreen Dempsey, and she shows up at his house one day, and she's pregnant, and she's got a 2-year-old with her, and she confesses to him that she's pregnant by a black man, and the child is half black. And he, in a statement he gave later on, very matter-of-factly says, well, they wouldn't want to, I was doing them a favor. They wouldn't want to live with being soiled by a black man. A half-breed child, what kind of future does that child have? So he did him a favor. He walked him behind his house, sat down on the banks of this pond behind his house. He pushed her in the water and drowned her. And then after she was dead, he took a hammer and beat the child to death. The autopsy report indicated there wasn't a bone in her body that wasn't broken. 2-year-old kid. But to him, she had no reason to live.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. And of course, Tyner, the one I convicted him of, and he got sentenced to death and executed for, Tyner was a black man who robbed and killed 2 white people in Horry County, the Moons, and that's unforgivable for Pee Wee. I don't think Pee Wee we never heard on any of the tapes or any information he ever wanted any money for killing Tyner, wanted any compensation in any way, shape, or form. I think he wanted to kill him because he killed white people.
And he was a killer himself.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I would note, as far as we know, he's the only white man to ever be executed for killing an African American in South Carolina.
Wow.
Maybe in this country, but certainly in South Carolina.
Wow. So when you come to the picture, tell me about what gets him in prison ultimately.
Okay. So there was a couple people that disappeared, and Shirley Ann Gaskins, his daughter, knew there was something wrong, especially about the little girl that disappeared. And she ultimately called the police and turned her dad in. And that led to him being prosecuted for 2 murders and sentenced to death on 2 separate occasions. And the little girl's name was Kim Gelkins. And the book describes how he killed her and then led everybody to believe for a year she'd gone off to California. Shirley discovered some of her clothes that Pee Wee said she took with her in a suitcase at her house. And so she called 2 North Charleston police officers investigating that. And she connected the dots and they arrested Pee Wee. And Shirley Ann testified against her dad. Now what's interesting about that is that 2 weeks ago I was in Florence signing books, and Shirley Ann showed up at the book signing.
Wow.
And she looks almost exactly the same as she did 40 years ago at the trial. And of course, the trial was in '83. And I said, "How you doing?" And she said, "Well, I miss my daddy." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry about that. He's got 50 great-great-great-grandchildren."
Wow.
50.
Wow.
And I said, "Well, do you regret doing what you did?" She said, "No, I had to do it or he'd keep killing."
Wow.
So, she's borne the responsibility and the guilt and the criticism by her family for doing that for 50 years.
Yeah, thank goodness she did there.
Thank goodness she did it, or he never would have been caught.
Yeah.
But that's all in the book. But I was shocked to see Shirley Ann a couple weeks ago.
Wow. So she testified, got put in prison initially with a death sentence?
Yep. And then Furman versus Georgia came down from the U.S. Supreme Court, which negated our process. Remember how I told you I picked a jury at 10 o'clock one morning and got sentenced at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? They said, no, you can't do that anymore. You've got to have a trial on guilt or innocence, and if he's found guilty, then a separate trial on punishment. And you've got to, the legislature has to decide what are the aggravating circumstances. Murder and armed robbery, murder and rape, murder of more than one person, murder over a child. There's statutory aggravating circumstances.
I got you. So, Senator, so what brings you into his life? So the Moons died, the Tyner death, is that how you get involved deeply?
Yeah, we had just finished prosecuting a death penalty case, which got life. We called it the Root Doctor murders, where some robbers had gone into a root doctor's office. I mean, it's sort of weird to imagine that a guy that's a voodoo doctor has an office, but he has an office and a waiting room, and dozens of people come to see him to get the root put on or the root taken off. I don't know what it is. But 3 people were killed, 2 people were wounded when they could not get the safe open. They started killing people. They did not get the death penalty, so I was basically packing that case up when I get a call from the Department of Corrections investigator saying, look, we just had a death row inmate blow himself up trying to escape.
Oh, wow.
I said, well, where did he get an explosive? Well, we think they're made out of match heads. So, interesting, hung up. A couple days later, I get a call from a different investigator saying, hey, the test came back. That was C4. That was a military-grade plastic explosive. This has taken on a whole new aspect. And so Al Waters from the Department of Corrections investigated it and collected enough evidence, including tapes of Pee Wee talking to Simo about how he's going to kill him, poison him, or blow him up, get me a stick of dynamite, a blasting cap, won't be no coming back from that. And then other inmates began giving statements, and so we had a pretty good case. Wow. When you listen to the Gaskins tape, he is so confident. He thinks it's humorous, funny. Just sit back and listen for the bang. That it's chilling because he's talking about killing somebody, not just killing him, mutilating him, blowing him up. And I remember sitting there going, good golly, this guy's a monster.
Yeah.
And yet when you meet him, he's affable, hail fellow, well met, just, always yucking it up. Just if you said he was a serial killer, if you didn't know any of this other stuff, you'd go, no, couldn't be him. Yeah. And he, during the trial, he didn't testify, but he argued to the jury because he thought he could, his personality and his ability to convince people to do things was so good. Now, it didn't work, but he was that confident. And so as we went through the trial, it became clearer and clearer that the jury was not impressed with his charisma, if you will.
Yeah. And I encourage everyone to read the book. There's details in here that we can't cover in this gracious amount of time that Dick's given us today. But the book describes what the prison was at that time. And I think his charisma got him a position as a handyman. They gave him a lot of freedom. I mean, that might be a question people have. How could he get access to this? How could he be in this kind of position? Because he was serving 13 life sentences, but eligible for parole in 10 years. He was a plumber. He was an electrician. He had all kinds of skills. They gave him a toolbox. They gave him access to all areas of the prison, and he picked all the other trustees. That was just the way it worked back then. And they saved money because they didn't have to hire a plumber or an electrician. So I guess because he was such a good con man, and they needed somebody, and everybody liked him. Everybody liked him. I met a judge during the trial. Pee Wee put the roof on his house. He was a roofer. Wow. And the judge leaned in and he said, hey, Pee Wee. He said, hey, Judge. They had a conversation, even though he's a serial killer. Nobody ever regarded him
I've saw flashes of danger, but never any consistent. He had the ability to keep that mask on of affability, of friendliness, of genuine, a sort of a genuine good guy.
Yeah.
But if you jabbed him hard enough, you'd see that drop, and you'd see something that would scare you.
Yeah. Wow. So certainly the trial takes place. He's found guilty. Now, was sentencing then, or things had changed?
Sentencing then, after the jury came back with death.
Death. Okay.
The judge ratified it, and then that would have been in April of 1983.
Okay. What was his reaction in the courtroom that day? What tell me about the courtroom very shortly that day when that came down.
Well, I mean, of course, this was a big deal back then. Now there's no court TV, there's no internet, there's none of that. Not like Murdaugh 40 years later,
Right.
but packed courtroom, verdict comes down, death. The jury was only out an hour. I mean, I think they'd made up their mind early on. Murder number 14? Really?
Yeah.
So there wasn't any gasp or, it wasn't like surprising or, oh my God. I mean, I think everybody expected it, including Pee Wee, because he did not weep or wail or jump up and down. He just he didn't shrug his shoulders. He just you could have told him that the restaurant was, out of the tomato soup and he was going to have broccoli.
Yeah.
He would have had the same reaction.
Yeah. And interesting in this, the book is so fascinating, talks about the Moon family. Certainly I'm from Horry County. They lived in Horry County, ran a store, was killed by Tyner, which put Tyner there with him, which was killed. But all this was put in motion by their son. Can you tell us briefly those dynamics and what was going on there?
So Simo was their adopted son, the Moon's adopted son, and he was extraordinarily close to them. Matter of fact, the whole family lived in a little compound within walking distance of the store, literally 150 feet from the store. And Tyner was living in the neighborhood. He was probably borderline, as we would say back then, retarded. Okay, not retarded, but close, not very bright. And the Moons and other people didn't like him hanging around the store and told him so. So there was some animosity there. The night of the murders, Tony Simo was watching. It's amazing I can remember these facts. But he was at home watching a movie called Rio Bravo with John Wayne. Wow. And the dog started barking, and he looked out the window and saw a young black man walking towards the store. The dogs were barking a lot, and he just basically told him to be quiet and went back and watched the movie. Of course, Tyner walks up to the store, pulls out a shotgun, and when Mrs. Moon hesitated, he shot her and then shot Mr. Moon, and then I think he shot her again to make sure she was dead. And then he left. Tony Simo always blamed himself that he didn't get up out of the chair from watching Rio Bravo and see what that guy was up to.
Wow.
And when he found out later on that night that they had been killed, he immediately thought it was Tyner.
Wow.
And if he'd gotten to Tyner before the cops had, Tyner would have been dead that night.
Yeah.
So Tyner gets indicted, tried, convicted, sentenced to death. It's very traumatic for Tony and his family. The Supreme Court reversed the case based on a final argument by the prosecutor. It came back, was retried. This is taking years at this point. Retried. He's sentenced to death again, and then he's on death row, and it's being appealed. At that point, Simo had had enough, and he said, "This guy, he needs to die." And he found a guy that knew Pee Wee, and they put him in touch. And Pee Wee, consistent with all his other privileges, had total access to a payphone. And for some reason, he tape recorded. Now, we know he tape recorded conversations with his wife and family, but he also tape recorded conversations with Simo and others. He had a little suction cup that he would put on the phone, And then he had a little cassette player that he would record it on cassette tapes. And in those conversations, he and Simo planned to kill Tyner with poison. That doesn't work. And then they come up with this plot where Pee Wee says, get me a quarter stick of dynamite, a blasting cap. I'll put it in the radio, send it into him, and just listen for the boom. Won't be no coming back from that. And they're giggling about it, he and Simo. And of course, he gets the C4 explosive, smuggles it in, and blows Tyner's head off. The fascinating thing was he would have gotten away with it. He ran a wire from his cell through a vent into the back of Tyner's cell that had a male plug on the end of it. The bomb was a unbreakable plastic cup issued by the Department of Corrections, a tumbler about that tall, that he melted a hole. He had a soldering iron, okay, just melted a hole in the bottom, put a female plug in that, and then attached that to the blasting cap, put the C4 on top of that, and then put nails, screws, any sharp piece of metal, and then glued a speaker on top of it and told Tyner it was a intercom. So he had somebody bring that, a guy that delivered the food delivered that to Tyner on death row. And Tyner plugged it in, and Pee Wee said, "Can you hear me?" And he said, "No." He said, "Well, hold it up to your ear." And then he plugged his end into the 110, and the autopsy pictures show, no hand, speaker in the head, killed, blew part of his head off. Pretty devastating.
Wow. But Dick, you put him, you got him guilty for doing it. I mean,
Jim Anders and I prosecuted him, got him guilty. We did the death sentence part and got him sentenced to death. Yes, that was in 1983.
Yeah. Wow. Well, hey, folks, we're running out of time. Please come back tomorrow for our final episode with Dick Harpootlian.
Can I say one thing before you shut it off?
Yes.
Hand me that book.
Yes, sir.
Buy the book.
Oh, for sure. Wow, for sure.